Starts tonight. We'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Waddington, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
God our Father, as we gather for this meeting this evening, give us the guidance and wisdom to make the proper decisions. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Gressler, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Lloyd? Here. Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Ms. Twine? Here. Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Mr. Poole is absent.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to excuse Mr. Poole.
Second.
Got a motion, second discussion. No objection, motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. To continue, did you get all the way down the roll, Ms. Gressler?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did I?
Mr. Brady is uncharacteristically quiet. So, before we begin, public service announcement. So I had some spots burned off here. So for those of you who don't use sunscreen, you should. And for those of you who are responsible for children or grandchildren, make sure you put it on them. I don't remember it being a thing when I was a kid, but it's important. So these are just precancerous things that get burned off. Mr. Brady, we won't be getting the gavel anytime soon, so don't get too anxious. But I did have some recommendations from my daughters. They said that, well, Dad, if you just put a little grease right there, then it would look like, the football players. And they said, you can put a helmet on, it would cover your bald spots too. So I really declined that. And this morning I was leaving, my wife said, that's really ugly. Maybe you should come home and get some makeup, before the meeting. And she looked at me and she pulled a Sarah Palin. She said, "Oh, wow, that's just lipstick on a pig." So I'm here in my public service mode. A lot of folks here tonight, thank you. We're always pleased to have a crowd to talk about the issues that are important to you and to the city. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of June 11, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move that we accept the minutes of the June 11th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
And a motion and second discussion. Without objection, motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Turning now to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address any of the regular items of business tonight, some, I guess, close to 20 in number. Please step to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts. And bear in mind that there's a three-minute portion on this part of the meeting, and I'll give everyone a chance to speak who wishes to.
Susie Wise, 105 West Water Street, the Hubbard Building, 13-year owner resident of downtown Sandusky. I paid city income taxes for 30 years. I had a speech, but I think a visual aid might be better. Here we have a city bus. The city bus and government is being driven by Mr. Wobser. Behind Mr. Wobser are the commissioners, including Lloyd and Murray. This bus is very fat and happy. It just had increased income tax and increased admissions tax. And that's not enough. That was to pay for city parking lot and city parks. They want more, and they're like, let's get some more. So they said, Mr. Wobser said, I know how to get more. I've done this before. We're gonna put a sign on the front of our bus called SID. And if we just get a few more people in our bus from downtown, we can run over the rest of the people downtown and take their money. So who else owns a lot of footage? Mr. Hogreef, a couple more developers, Hody and Hare. Hody recently purchased the State Theater, the Sandusky Register. They get enough footage, and they only convinced 21 more people to get in the bus with them. How did those other businesses get in there? I don't know. Some of them got grant money from the city. Some of them may have felt obligated. Some may have felt they couldn't come to this meeting tonight because of repercussions if they talked. So, this bus, with over 200 property owners in front of them and not in the bus, decides to run over those people. And guess what? They take their money. once they take their money, they're not obligated to do anything for those people out there because their board, 2 city, 3 commercial, and 2 residential can do whatever they want with the money. And don't think it's just up to clean up downtown Sandusky. This board says, we're gonna take your money every year for 5 years. And Ohio Revised Code says, this SID can issue bonds. They can put us severely in debt, and we have to pay those bonds. They're obligated. Who knows what their real agenda is to take over?
Thank you, ma'am.
Know what I say? I say, these people, these 3 here, they think they own this bus, but they don't, because they can be taken out of the bus.
Thank you. This is not a sporting event. Conduct yourselves like you're participating in a government, please.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street. I wanted to talk about a couple of items here on the agenda. One of them is you're spending $2 million tonight on the design work for the landing. I'm totally against that kind of spending. We've got deplorable streets we can't drive on. We have 150 houses to take down yet, and we have a crappy old subway on Tiffin Ave that needs to be remodeled. And your engineer tells me that the TIF proceeds will pay back this $2 million. But in the meantime, that $2 million is tying up the city's money to do other things in the city. Now, my second one here is the city is expanding the transient rentals down there on the Cove Street. Look at all this blue. This is spreading like a disease, transient rentals. It's covering Cove, Curran, Make Street, Sycamore, Garfield, First Street, Lockwood, and it's bleeding over across Meg Street, west of Meg Street. And the city promised they weren't going to get into the neighborhoods. It is in the neighborhoods, folks. There's one in my neighborhood. I was disappointed when I heard this, but they're going to let him operate for 6 months while he gets what you call a layover, a mapping of what is allowed in that area. How big that mapping's going to be, I don't know. But you're going to drive out the rest of the homeowners with this. This is not fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Protocol has just come up. Diane Sandusky, property owner, Sandusky. I have a few questions. These are questions. So after I'm done asking the questions, if you guys want to come up, if you want to add in for discussion, then I'll sit down. I need to know who's responsible, whose responsibility was it to notify the Chesapeake Lofts owners about the SID, and who did not send a petition to them or notify them in any way about the SID project? Whose responsibility was that? Planning board?
So the way questions at this part of the meeting are handled is that when we get to that piece of
Okay.
legislation, they'll be
Thank you,
addressed
sir.
at that time.
Second question, Mr. Mayor, have you ever, actually, how have you vetted the property developers, their partners? How are you holding them accountable? There's still issues that the city promised with the Chesapeake that weren't addressed. Where is your city plan, and how does everybody in this room get a copy of it? Is the city goal to jack up the taxes of everybody at the Chesapeake Lofts? And we'd like to know who bought up all the property around the Chesapeake Lofts. Who signed the paper? Are they female business enterprise? The foundation name? The person, the persons? And what are the city and state matching funds that'll be used? Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Marcy Platt. I live at 1217 Columbus Avenue. I have a couple of things that are on the agenda tonight. The first one was that there's an update to the Bay Pathway. I tried to access that on the internet today, and it said the file was not available. Wanted to know if there's a recent picture of what's actually going to be on the pathway. That goes into the next part, which I believe Angie Byington's going to ask for $2 million for the pathway landing project. I'm not by any means a planner. I am not by any means an accountant. But it does look like the city of Sandusky is going to bear the entire burden of that design process. And at $2 million, the question is, what is the bang for the buck that the actual citizens who live in Sandusky are going to get? I live on Columbus Ave. It's 2 miles away from this trail. I think we're doing a lot of Cedar Point's work for them because it's my understanding they are going to put their operations on the landing. Why are we doing all the design work for the metro parks? Why are we taking out the easements? Why are we doing all that work when actually it's going to only arbitrarily affect the average person in Sandusky? We have enough restaurants, we have enough bars, we don't have to go there to drink or eat. The average person is going to use that. What's interesting is that you allow Bayview to put it right off the street. But what we're allowing in Sandusky is for you to go along that trail, which incorporates Cedar Point's property. Why are we incorporating Cedar Point's property without any financial at all, plus giving them a 30-year, 100% tax abatement? It sounds like we're putting all the money in. I don't see anywhere where Cedar Point's putting money in. So if those questions could be addressed when this comes up, it would be very interesting. Like I said, I'm not an expert in this, but just from the average taxpayer reading it, we're doing $2 million is a lot of money for just design. And I know there's a lot of work involved with the EPA and assessments and all this type of stuff, but we should not be shouldering this burden alone. This should be Bayview. If we're going into Bayview with this should be the Erie Metro Parks, this should be Cedar Point, and the city of Sandusky. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pyle.
Hello, my name is Regis Robbins. I'm the president of the Hubbard Building Homeowners Association. I live on 105 West Water Street, Unit 2C. And I want to talk a little bit about the proposed SID. I would first like to start by saying the creation of a SID is not meant to be driven by a municipality or government body, but rather the non-government property owners, and giving the opportunity to the government to participate. What has happened here instead is a process fully controlled by the city manager, who blatantly gerrymandered the proposed SID boundaries so he can force his personal agenda that has essentially zero support by the residents of the proposed SID. What is extremely important to note is that without the city frontage yes vote, the creation of the SID would fail, pure and simple. Equally outrageous is how the burden of taxation is formulated. While the city manager voted 31% of the yes votes, the city dollars contributed into the SID only represents 3.5%. And the residents' contribution is double that of the commercial. I have to be honest with you. I have never in my entire life seen something so unjust and so rigged. To add insult to injury, the purpose of the SID, from what I have been told, because I haven't seen anything, is to clean up our neighborhood. So what the city manager is proposing is to have the downtown residents pay for the trash left behind by tourists and visitors coming into our neighborhood, all the while enriching the businesses being visited and the city through sales taxes. Let me remind the commissioners, this trash burden that the city manager wants us, the neighborhood residents, to pay for was not, I repeat, not created by the residents of the neighborhood. One other troubling fact, creating a SID with its own bureaucracy and its own power to raise money, all to hire a couple of extra hands to keep downtown clean during the tourist season, seems very much an overkill to me. Which also leads me to believe the city manager and his friends have an ulterior motive to have this SID created, which is very troubling to me, and it should be to you as commissioners. I think we can all agree that tax increases do not stimulate economic growth. The SID tax would need to be disclosed to prospective buyers and will act as a deterrent to those looking at purchasing residential property in the historic district, hampering the residential development that would enhance business growth and tax revenue to the city. I have already heard of stories of businesses being told by their landlord that rents will go up if the SID goes through and they will be forced to move out of the SID district. This is the countervailing force that is not being talked about. When I first purchased my condo, my property tax was abated. I could afford to have a boat and rented a slip at Dock of the Bay. When the abatement expired, my property tax doubled, and in looking at ways to pay for the tax increase, I moved my boat out of the marina. So I think, too, commercial business owners need to think hard about property tax increases because it does impact disposable income and what people can afford. This request to create a SID in the historic downtown is the agenda of one person, the city manager, who has hijacked a noble program for the gain of a few. He clandestinely pushed his agenda, as I am not aware of a single resident receiving a petition. And why would that be, one would ask? The only logical explanation is that the city manager was controlling the process along with a select number of commercial property owners and wanted to get this SID approved without letting the residents of the community know it was moving forward. And of course he didn't want us to know. If the residents were to find out what was going on and how unfair the SID was, they would certainly have a reason to put a stop to it. Well, we did find out. We found out all the facts, and that is why I am here tonight to voice my deep concern. The last time I checked, I lived in the United States of America, where democracy and fairness is the guiding light.
Ms. Robbins, you're kind of over your time. Could you wrap up?
All right,
please?
yep, I'm almost done. I would like to remind the city commissioners that our ancestors, 245 years ago, commenced a revolt against a British king for exactly what the city manager is attempting to do. And because of that, I'm asking that the commissioners vote no on creating the proposed special improvement district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robbins.
Dan Delahunt, 1025 Cedar Point Road. I'm also here to talk about the SID. I own property in the Hubbard Building downtown also. Eric did come to a meeting at the Hubbard Building about a year ago to explain a little bit, and it was kind of in its infancy at that point, so we really didn't know the details. But I guess my couple of questions here for the staff or for the commission. It is a progressive tax on the residential properties in the downtown area and not the commercial. So for the first 5 years of the program, as it's outlined, the residential tax, it begins at about a 7.8% increase and rises every year for 5 years on the residential properties only. And I don't know why, since the residents are not the one creating the problem in the downtown area as far as the needing to be cleaned up, why we're the ones footing the bill or most of the bill. The tax is based on your tax duplicate. You have a fair market value and you have an assessed value, valuation of the property. Every assessment in the county, let's say about 95%, and that figure might even be a little bit higher. I talked to the county about that, and it was mentioned that only a couple of little light assessments, probably in the city of Huron or in the city of Huron, are based on the fair market value on the tax duplicate as opposed to the assessed value. And I was wondering why the staff decided to make it on the on the fair market value as opposed to the assessed value. Obviously, the fair market value is higher, and I guess it just generates more money. And with the properties that are abated, because it's based on the fair market value and not the assessed value, does that mean that when these projects that are finishing up come online, that they will be taxed at fair market value of the property after it's completed and pay the SID on that fair market value of the property, or are they going to enjoy the abatement as they do with their regular tax bill? So I don't know the answer to that. Again, it seems pretty oppressive to be placing this kind of tax as much as it's been on the residents with very, very little ability to be able to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
I'm Kyoko Yokomori Sanders of the Chesapeake, and I'm against the SID project. For these reasons, we at the Chesapeake have had absolutely no input. We have never been asked for this project. And secondly, I think we in this district, our civil rights are being violated because we are not treated equally if this goes through. Our assessment will be added to our property tax, and then we are not the same in paying the taxes with the rest of the county. And that's unconstitutional to have this segment where people live are being taxed more than the rest of the people in the county. And that's definitely, in my book, unconstitutional. And as Patrick Henry said, since we have had no input, taxation without representation is tyranny. And that's what city is doing to us. And the only people who are benefiting in my book are the consulting firm who's doing this behind the scene, behind us knowledge, the consulting firm in Columbus. And outside of Mr. Murray, the rest of you commissioners don't seem to have any personal stake in this district. And I am, at this point, dead set against SID. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders.
Hello, excuse me. My name is George Gast, and I own Musicians Alley in the building at 151 Columbus Ave in downtown Sandusky. I have a different spin to the SID program. I was in high hopes that it would clean up our city and clean up the downtown, and I haven't seen that happening. I honestly, personally feel that when we had Sandusky Main Streets and John Lippis had some personnel working for him, the city was much cleaner in our downtown area. I don't see anything that has improved with these employees that SID has hired. I know it's just a test program for the summer, but there again, I don't want to see us get railroaded into a 5-year deal where we have no representation and voting no at some future point. And I just want to close that I've been in downtown Sandusky for 29 years. I love downtown Sandusky and I love our city, and I just want what's best for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gast.
Hey, Kelly. Could you pass those out to the commissioners? We're passing out some documents. passing out a map. This map was all blue at the last city commission meeting. What I've done is I overlaid all of the city-owned property and the commissioner-owned property in yellow and beige so that you can see the proportion of the property that's really blue versus the proportion of property that's owned by the municipal government and the commissioners. On the back shows each petition owner, each person that signed a petition for how many parcels, whether that was commercial or whether that was residential. 110 properties, parcels were part of the petition, 107 were commercial, 3 were residential. Those 3 residential just happened to be owned by commercial owners. So this SID map was presented at the last commission meeting as all blue. I overlaid the yellow and the beige area to show the city and commissioner ownership. There were many city-driven pre-map design discussions with owners to determine who'd vote yes and who'd vote no. For example, SID inclusion meetings were held with Sandusky Yacht Club and with the 333 East Water Street Condo Association. There's a lot of footage there. Both said no. So the city didn't draw the map around them. That's to avoid the no vote that they got to deal with for that footage. Why is Crable not in? Notice the late 400-foot grab of city-owned parking lot in front of Variety Village. I mean, it just goes right around the parking lot and comes back. But hey, let's get that extra 400 feet because we can vote on that. Then there's a 1,392 feet of city-owned Washington Park. I mean, this is further proof that the city led the intent to gerrymander the SID map. It's fixed. Now, the district property is made up of 237 district owners. They own 381 parcels. 212 owners of 271 parcels said no. That's 89% ownership no. The city of Sandusky, 2 commissioners, a few developers, businesses, they own a significant amount of property footage, of which most is very low value. So very low cost to them for the SID. The 89% no's will pay 73% of the money. That's taking $83,000 in the first year from the huge 89% no vote owners. Year 1, cost per foot frontage, Chesapeake, $113.50 a foot. Hubbard Building, $57.74. Murray, $11.65. Most others, $6.64. Commissioner Lloyd, $4.17. The city, $1.04. The city of Sandusky and the 2 commissioners here collectively own 4,470 feet. With this 37% of votable front, without that votable front, you would have reached 45.6% yes on frontage. Remove the developer who has business ventures with at least 1 commissioner, and you're down to 26%. We know for a fact there are some business owners that felt pressure. Even some were tricked into signing. And if the city commissioner business owner can lobby district property owners to vote yes, if that's not an ethics issue, I don't know what is. This SID process has formed a deep divide between SID residence owners and the city manager, the commission, and a few developers and businesses. But we understand the pressure the businesses are under. I mean, they fear the city of repercussions. Less grant money, more rules, more regulations. But we know exactly what very few businesses not to support. Tonight, you guys, you can drive the final nail in the coffin for our relationship. Or this commission can vote this SID down. And tonight can be the starting point for you, for each one of you, to earn our trust back. How each of you vote tonight will significantly impact how we support you and the city manager in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Bob Burden, 401 West Shoreline Drive, Unit 351 at the Chesapeake. here to talk about a no vote for the SID. Many reasons already given. I would strongly encourage you to listen to those. I'd like to point out one thing. First of all the residents of the Chesapeake currently give 99.95% of our property tax dollars to the city of Sandusky. They don't go to the schools, they don't go to the county, they don't go to the library, they all go to the city because of the tax setup that was founded at the beginning of the Chesapeake and the Paper District project. So you're already getting $500 and some thousand a year from us 194 units down at the Chesapeake. Now you want to have another 10% of that to take care of this little SID downtown, of which we will get very, very little use of. We have our own small amount of frontage. We have our own maintenance folks that we pay dearly for. They take care of the sidewalk in front of our unit. They take care of any graffiti that's on the front of the building, which there hardly ever is. We take care of our own unit, and we pay dearly for it. We don't need a 10% tax increase, and we don't need any help of the city, and we certainly don't need to pay for the downtown merchants to take care of their property. When I was a kid back in the 50s and 60s, the merchants took care of their own property. I can remember as a little kid going down the sidewalks, and they're out front with a hose, hosing down their own sidewalk in front of their thing, washing their own windows, taking care of their own business. Now you need the money of the residents that don't really live in the district. We're out there on the far end in between a bunch of city land to pay for supposedly cleaning up the downtown area. It's not right, and I strongly urge a no vote on this SID. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Laryngitis, so I don't have too much to say, but I'm with them. But I would like to know, we used to have, I've lived downtown for a long time, 105 West Water Street, 2A Hubbard Building. And I've lived downtown for quite a while. And I've noticed that the city is really dirty for the last 2 years. It's dirty. But we used to have people doing their community service downtown had the orange volunteer shirts on. I haven't seen them for 2 years since you started to plan this. And I know our jails are probably overcrowded. What happened to those people that used to come down and pull weeds and sweep and cleaned, and the city was cleaner? And I agree. You know, the businesses can clean in front of their units. They're reaping the benefit of all the people coming in, their restaurants, they're busy. I'm glad the downtown is developing, but you're doing it on the backs of the people who are living here supporting it. You want to get all those condos filled in, you want all those buildings filled in with people living down here. That'll be a lot of tax money when they're in here. But why are you going to tax the hell out of them before they even get down here? I mean, usually you wait until your city starts to build in. You'll be getting tax money from them. But you're taxing people. I walk around, there's so many empty areas in this city. And yeah, great, you're going to give them all a tax abatement. But in the meantime, you're going to beat me up on taxes. I have a 2-bedroom condo with no garage, no balcony, no nothing. And my taxes are very, very high, way higher than when I had a big house out in the country. And these extra add-ons, and progressives. I mean, really? We are not California. I'm glad the people are coming in from California with their big money. We're not from California, we're from Ohio, sorry. And we're not from the city. But we have a really nice town here, and I don't think you push people out with taxes before you bring them in. And I really want to know what happened to those volunteer guys, because I'm sorry, but the little girl and guy that are pushing the carts around, they're usually sitting at the subway. That's what the girl at the subway told me, that they go in there for hours on end. The guy at the Segway let them use the restroom, and they're usually in there for like half hours at a time. I don't know who your supervisor is. I know they bought a car now, they got a truck now, so they're already spending your money. But this is really an unnecessary push that you're doing, and I have, as everybody else, deep suspicion that you have big plans for the money that you're going to get, and it's not just for health and safety. I've lived downtown for a long time and have never felt not safe. Police department's done a fine job, I think, but I've never not felt safe downtown, and I've come in at all hours of the day and night. I live right in the middle of downtown, and I just think this is a really underhanded push to get money with no vote from your property people. And I can't even believe that you're doing it.
Ma'am, could you state your name for Mrs. Cresser's minutes?
She knows me, Nancy Birch. But that's it's unfortunate because we're all like happy with what's going on. We're happy with what you've been doing. But this is a very unfortunate thing that you're trying to push right down our throats. Without notice, by the way, did anybody get a notice? I got no notice. Nothing.
Only if asked.
Pardon?
Only if you asked, you got one.
Oh, thank God you did. Thank God you did.
That's all right.
No notice. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Birch.
Trudy Thompson, 105 West Water Street, Unit 3B, and we also own a condo at the Chesapeake, Unit 317. I have laryngitis, so I might start coughing, so this won't take long. I think the SID is something we should not do. I hope you vote no. Also, the city took over the TIF fund at the Chesapeake, over $500,000 a year. As a condo owner, from the very beginning, I never got to vote yes or no on that. So that is another thing that's kind of in my crawl, but I hope you vote no on the SID. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Hello. My name is Suleiman Trzynka, and my husband Michael and I purchased our property at 401 West Shoreline Drive about 4 years ago after looking at over 30 properties from Huron to almost Marblehead. And the reason we selected downtown Sandusky was because it was downtown Sandusky, and we can walk to everywhere except Kroger's. And we enjoy that. Our children love to come here, and we enjoy being a part of the downtown community to the point that I've taken a part-time job to be a part of the downtown community. We are highly dissatisfied with the municipal government that has pushed through their own private agenda against the will of the people. This is backhanded, underhanded, and as I said before, we have a precedent. It's called the Boston Tea Party. So consider this, the Sandusky Tea Party. We do not want, nor do we deserve, taxation without equal representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brzezinski.
Dennis, can you stop them?
Hello, my name's Dudley Earhart, and I live at 401 West Shoreline Drive, Unit 333. I just want to go over one thing with you here is what we're spending down at Chesapeake. My real estate tax just came in $7,202. We pay $358 a month for HOA fees. That total comes out to $11,486 that we have to pay, and this is not even getting the SIDS thing yet. So that's going to push us up around $12,000 a year to live downtown. I'm against it.
Thanks, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Long. I'm a property owner over at the Chesapeake, recently purchased in August of last year. I think I have an interesting perspective because I'm actually from here, 1988 Perkins grad, moved on to the Cleveland area, have for years have owned a boathouse. Interesting to hear about the Cove project as well. Right over here at Billman Lane. I've been coming back and forth for many years, and my wife and I decided that, hey, it'd be kind of nice if we had a second home right here in downtown. So I think the reinvestment, I think everything that you guys have done with downtown Cleveland has been, or downtown Sandusky has been awesome. Reminds me of Cleveland and the rebirth that's happened there. I spent this afternoon some time reading through the proposed ordinance. It states in there that owners are required to contribute their fair share. As noted in the proposal, per Ohio Code 1710.06, each member's special assessment will be proportionate to their benefits. In this case, it is my opinion, and I think any other logical person's opinion, that linking front footage and market values, as you've done, is not fair, as one does not have a correlation to the other. I would propose that you amend this proposal, and instead of using the rate times market value approach, use the rate times percent of overall square footage approach. That would be fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Anyone else present wishing to address the commission on any of our regular agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. You've woken up a sleeping giant here, it sounds like, and this is an indication of what's going on in the community, not just with this issue, but streets, the parks, the smoking ban, what have you. This represents the real segment of Sandusky, what Sandusky's all about, and I hope that you guys take this as a wake-up call, that not everybody's happy with the direction the commission's going right now. I've been following city politics for over 33 years, and I got to tell you, this issue right here probably ranks in the top 5 of all time Sandusky great scams or con jobs. I'm telling you, it ranks right up there towards the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwanger. Anyone else present wishing to address the commission? If not, then we will turn to several presentations and a public hearing. We start out with a public hearing regarding the 2019 budget. And for that purpose, Mr. Soloway is going to present something.
Yep, I'll be brief. Basically, what we'll do tonight is have a very brief public hearing on the tax budget for 2019. I have a few comments that I'll make that explains the process of the tax budget and what it is, and then we'll open it up for any comments or questions by commission and the public, and then I will close the hearing. So the main question that people ask is, why do we have a tax budget, or why are we doing this? And really the main reason we do this is a compliance requirement as part of our annual audit, that we need to have a public hearing and approve the tax budget. The Ohio Revised Code spells out specifically what information is required to be in a tax budget, which includes both historical data and budget data. Prior to 2011, the Erie County Budget Commission actually waived this requirement, so this is something we've only been doing for about the last 8 years. And according to the Budget Commission, the purposes of setting a tax budget is primarily to assist the county auditor in setting property tax rates, to help allocate local government funds, and basically to help start the planning process for next year. One of the other things I just always like to mention is sort of the transparency, at least on the financial side, the information that we have available on our website. Usually every time this year, or every year at this time, I try to tout that I think we're probably the most transparent local government in Erie County as far as the wealth of information we have online. That includes our monthly financial reports, our comprehensive annual financial report, our finance committee agenda and minutes, our audit reports, and most recently our issue 8 reports. So I encourage everybody, if they haven't had a chance to, definitely take a look at the finance page on the city's website. You can have a wealth of information there. That's really all I have. At this point, I'll turn it over for any comments or questions for commission, and then public is welcome to comment and go from there.
Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to pass along to the commission and the residents too. The finance committee gave great accolades during the last finance meeting for all of Mr. Soloway's work and the transparency that the city is giving, and the new changing up the issue 8 report so you can see a little bit more of where those dollars are going. So just a thank you to Hank and the finance committee wanted me to pass that along.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Additional questions or comments, commissioners? Not, then this is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to address the 2019 tax budget, you may do so. This is one of these kind of funny things we're required to do by the Ohio Revised Code. It's not particularly substantive, but we're required to do it. But if anyone wishes to speak to it, you're welcome to do so. You may step to it, yeah.
Well, thanks, because this is the first time I've ever seen one, so it's really good. But the general category seems to be overwhelmingly large. So could you just explain briefly what goes into the general category, the general fund?
General fund is primarily going to be, as far as expenditures goes, or are you talking revenues? Like
Yeah, it's money spent.
money spent. So primarily, I'd say about 70% of what's spent out of the general fund is wages and fringes, which would include your police, fire, horticultural services, those kind of departments.
Yeah, this actually has nothing to do with the city's process of setting its own budget, approving the budget, so it's just for county purposes. Anyone else wishing to speak during this hearing? If not, then that hearing is closed. And we have actually 3 presentations. 2 were just added this morning. First, Ms. Byington, as you're making your way up there, I take it you're going to be introducing some other folks as well. And then after that, we have 2 projects regarding the Sandusky Bay Initiative that have been added to the agenda tonight at Mr. Fine's request. Ms. Byington.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of commission. The Planning Commission has forwarded their recommendation for amendment of the zoning map to create a transient overlay district for multiple properties within the Cove District. This would not change the underlying zoning of the properties, but would provide them the ability to transient rent as well. The city has conducted a very open process related to this. There was a general public meeting and a Planning Commission working session in March, a public hearing at Planning Commission in April, and tonight, a public hearing at City Commission. Notices were posted and mailed throughout the process. As you can see on this slide, the proposed overlay district would include properties on both sides of Meigs Street between Washington and Monroe, properties on both sides of First Street between Meigs and Erie Street, and properties east of Meigs and north of First to the Bay. The current zoning of these properties includes single-family and two-family residential, commercial recreation, and public facility. Properties in red and maroon are zoned commercial recreation that are outside of the district and currently are permitted to transient rent. This proposed overlay district was initiated in part due to the success of transient rental properties located adjacent to the proposed district. Approval of the transient overlay district would mean that property owners could rent their properties for less than 30 days at a time. In 2017, the city approved a zoning ordinance outlining the process to create such districts and stated that they shall be created to spur investment in declining geographic areas with the goal of increasing property values and maintenance of homes in areas that are close in proximity to commercial and retail areas. At the same time, the city amended the Environmental Rental and Housing Code to create a transient rental application and regulations such as parking, inspection, and violations. Per the county auditor's website, the average market value of properties within this district are well below the county and the city averages. In conclusion, staff and the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed transient overlay district as it is in line with the bicentennial and comprehensive plan. It is adjacent to properties already permitted to transient rent and will help to continue to increase property values within this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byington. Commissioners, questions or comments for Ms. Byington?
Yes, I didn't get a copy of your PowerPoint.
Well, that question was for commissioners, but you can take that up with Ms. Byington in just a moment, I'm sure. Commissioners, questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Ms. Byington.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, next we have Mr. Klein. I'm going to introduce you to introduce our guests. You've been doing a lot of work on the Sandusky Bay Initiative, and we've been very fortunate to receive a grant from the ODNR.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
This was a public hearing, so we should probably open up that.
Oh, I'm sorry, it did not indicate that on my agenda, so I was not aware of that. So, my error. So that the transient overlay is actually a hearing. So if there is anyone who wishes to speak to the transient overlay district or its creation, Please step to the microphone and give us your name and address and share with us your thoughts.
Hello, Marcy Platt, 1217 Columbus Avenue. My question is, once you have a transient rental, and then the ownership, you sell your transient rental to another person, is it still considered a transient rental?
Ms. Byington, can you address that question?
Through you, Mr. President. So if it is a permitted transient rental, which a property within this district, if it passes, would be permitted, it would continue to be a transient rental only if the new owner wanted it to be a transient rental. And then they would go through and they would register as a transient rental and have to continue the process with our code department. So it doesn't have to stay transient rental. Again, all of the existing zoning that's underlying stays. So it's only an option for whoever owns the property to transient rent if they want to.
First, I think it's a misnomer that transient rental is ever going to bring up property values. That doesn't make any sense. That may be your opinion, but that doesn't make sense. For anybody that has rentals or lives next to rentals, I think they understand that. The other thing that I'm concerned about, let's say you have a really good landlord next door who transient rents. He sells the property. The next person that comes in then, who owns the place next, they automatically get transient rental, correct?
Through you, Mr. President. They would have the same right to operate a transient rental if they were registered and went through the inspection process. And then there is a violation section, so there's penalties for every violation that they have, and after 3, we can revoke their ability to transient rent.
So if I buy a property that is already a transient rental, I can then rent it out as a transient rental. I do not have to go through the process of reapplying or anything like that.
Through you, Mr. President, no, that is incorrect. If you are the new owner, you would have to register as a new landlord of a transient rental and go through the same process. You would have to register and have the inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Platt. Anyone else wishing to speak to the transient rental overlay? Then this hearing is closed, and thank you, Mr. Haber, for keeping me straight on the straight and narrow there. Okay, Mr. Klein.
Yes.
You're up.
Yes, so very briefly, we have, early last year, we received $1 million from the state of Ohio to do some investigation work, to do some engineering work on projects within Sandusky Bay along the coastline for the city of Sandusky. And tonight, those projects have come to a culmination. I'd like to introduce 2 different teams that worked on these projects. The first team up here is Foth, and we have Mike Raymond and Mark Sensor, who's with KS Associates, and I see Brian Heinrich snuck in the back there. And with the second presentation, Tom Denbo can speak as far as that site as well. Now, they'll get into the details, they'll get into the sites, but I also want to make sure that I point out that Scudder Mackey, who's the director of ODNR, Office of Coastal Management, who has been very wonderful to work with and very instrumental in getting these funds and getting these projects moving, getting us on the right track, as these types of projects are not normal for a municipality our size. So I'll turn it over to Foth.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Really do appreciate your time this evening. We entered this project recognizing that Sandusky Bay is really a significant and unique ecosystem within the Midwest and the Great Lakes. And it contains some of the most significant coastal wetlands on Lake Erie. And as a result, a number of parties came together, but starting with Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the city of Sandusky came together to do certain activities. And we've spent the last year engaged in these activities, which included the initial analysis and engineering design for the project. We've had a number of public outreach activities that we've been engaged in. One of our primary focuses is to look at the beneficial reuse of dredged material, which is going to be important here in 2020. And in doing so, we're hoping to restore habitat and improve water quality in Sandusky Bay. We have entered all these activities with a number of scientists and activities, and I would just point out a list here of all of the collaborative activity and people involved and organizations involved. Certainly, university personnel have been involved with this, scientists of the highest caliber, the City of Sandusky, the Department of Natural Resources, Ohio EPA, the U.S. Corps of Engineers, and many, many other organizations. Throughout the process of going through this design exercise, we have followed a very rigorous process, and this rigorous process included working with the stakeholders and bringing ideas forward to understand, what was possible to do with reusing dredge material. We set critical priorities that is going to help Sandusky Bay to achieve these priorities. And we developed approaches, and we debated those approaches amongst the scientists and the engineers and the public stakeholders on how to go about doing these things in the best possible way. We designed projects to meet these objectives, and I'll turn it over to Mark to sort of describe a little bit more about what we've done.
Yeah, the objectives of the project we're looking to push forward here was to prioritize a soft edge, a nature-based shoreline approach to beneficially reusing dredge material in Sandusky Bay. The dredge material in Sandusky Bay issue is going to become a bigger and bigger issue over the next few years as there's no longer allowed to be open lake disposal after year 2020, which a lot of us think is a great thing to help clean up the lake, and we've got to find something to do with that dredge material. Scotter's team came up with the plan of using it to create restoration of backwater emergent habitat, which we think is a great goal for that. As we looked at the different alternatives, we wanted to make sure also that the areas we were looking to put them and the way we designed the alternatives wasn't going to have any impact on recreation in the bay or navigation in the bay. And one of the last things we looked at is that a lot of the historical collection of dredge material, when it couldn't be placed in Lake Erie, was done in confined disposal facilities. And we wanted to make sure that what we were designing was not going to be a new CDF for Sandusky Bay, that we'd be able to tolerate some resuspension, loss of material, and to do it really with habitat benefits rather than just a facility to enclose it. So what we came up with, we were given two sites to look at. One is west of sort of the downtown area here, just west of the coal dock, mostly along the Norfolk Southern Railroad right away, and then working our way up to the west there. This is our Site 1 project. It's going to be going on in 4 phases. Phase 1 is what we've kind of detailed the design out for now, which is just at the sort of east end of the project area there. Each one of these projects is intended to, each one of these phases is intended to take on about 1 year of dredge material, so about 150,000 cubic yards that would normally be dredged out of the bay and put in the lake, but with a beneficial reuse of creating habitat. Site 2 is along the Cedar Point Causeway, way out to Cedar Point, just south of the Marina Basin. Cedar Point's been a great partner to work with on this planning phase. They've been to our kind of stakeholder meetings all the way through the process. And we're excited about this project at phase 2 because it gives us a lot more of an opportunity to get more emergent water habitat as water will kind of flow through the structures that enclose the dredge material and give us a lot of beneficial wetland habitat in that area. This gets into a little bit of how we're going to construct it. We've got some cross sections here that show the different berms and breakwaters we'll have to use to dissipate wave energy, and how the areas will be planted to create the wildlife and wetland habitat that we're hoping for. All right, are there any questions? It's from the commission first.
Commissioners, questions, comments? Thank you, sir. And there's a second presentation.
All right, thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak. I, too, have a little bit of laryngitis and allergies. I'm going to talk to you about Site 3. This is the third site of a series of sites that are coming out of what's called the Sandusky Bay Initiative. As most of you know who live in the area, there's a number of issues with planktothrix and pollution issues. And the goal here is to think about how we can improve the functions of wetlands in the area because they act really like kidneys. They also provide important habitat for fish and fishing by local residents. And in particular, the part that you just heard is focused on beneficial use. In our particular project, after looking at the project, and we did a number of things, our project's located in East Sandusky Bay. The idea was we came in and looked at the whole Bay Area to try to figure out the optimum site that would be both a benefit for the overall goals, which is to improve water quality, provide habitat for fish resources, and also include the potential for recreation opportunities, get people down to the waterfront. So most of you know this is owned by Erie Metro Parks in this area. We did a lot of investigations over there. You can see Pipe Creek. And the two sites that were selected for our project, for two projects I'm going to briefly describe, are the habitat mounds and again a nature-based shoreline coastal wetland restoration. This is just a couple pictures for those of you of the Back Bay area. Dating from 1926. One is from one of the hunt clubs originally, and you can see that the red arrows represent different periods and water level elevations, and the whole Back Bay was heavily vegetated. A few years later, it changed quite a bit. And just to give you a reference point, this is the former Griffin Airport site, sport complex right there. And then this is Plum Brook right here coming in through there. And so you can notice that there was a heck of a lot more wetlands there. Well, over time, a combination of higher water levels, impact by carp, and other things have reduced it. So in the process, we've decided to focus on a project that can reduce turbidity, which means it improves the overall habitat, take out the wave action, which generates a lot of sediment, which then impacts the aquatic vegetation and the plants and fish, as well as create a series of terraces to almost allow to anticipate water variation over time so you can maximize the benefit of those wetland plants to act as filters or kidneys for the river. The project is situated after considerable amount of review and evaluation by stakeholders and the other partners. It will be situated on this side of the landing park proposal. It's an area that's heavily disturbed by past land use practices, filling in past airport activities, and a lot of phragmites, which does not do a lot of good in terms of the quality. The idea is to integrate this project with the proposed trail project through there. It'll add an amazing amount of benefit because of the experience of being near these coastal wetlands. It'll serve as really almost ecotourism function, as well as give an opportunity to learn about these really important assets that you have here. The project here, just again to orient you, this is the runway going, the old runway up here, over here. And the idea is to create a berm along here to diminish the impact of wave action and erosion that's occurring along the shoreline and creating those sediments, and also a series of step areas that will be planted with wetland plants. We're going to be removing all of the phragmites, including the roots, to prevent regeneration. So it'll create a much more diverse habitat for a lot of different species that use this kind of thing, and at the same time, give the visitor a pretty amazing experience in terms of that. This is just a quick overview of the site. This is kind of representative of the berm with the back wetland that'll be behind it over time, designed to minimize or not be impacted by wave action. The other project we're proposing as a pilot, these are both pilot projects, is what we call a habitat mound. And one of the things that has happened is you get a lot of sediment coming in from your tributaries into the lake, which is again impacting the back quality of water back there. The idea is to create these mounds using timber, reusing timber and root wads to basically capture the sediments to create and bring the bottom up so we could regenerate the vegetation that's there and greatly enhance the habitat. Because currently that sediment has come in, changed the bottom characteristics, altered the habitat such that you don't get a lot of vegetation growth in there anymore, and a greatly diminished ecosystem value. So that's the second project. And again, thank you to the city for their opportunity to work, and also the funding for this came from the Office of Coastal Management. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, questions or comments? Mr. Mackey, I want to thank you and the state for being great partners to the city and to our local natural resources. This is one of these issues that long-term is hugely important. Ohio is a has a multi-billion dollar tourism and water-based economy, fishing and all the other activities that are so important to our local economy. We lose sight of that sometimes, but the quality of Lake Erie and Sandusky Bay are key economic drivers for our area. And both the Ohio EPA and the Ohio ODNR have been great partners in that process over the last couple of years, figuring out how to address the algal blooms, how to increase the quality of the water in our area. And for that, I thank you and the governor for your leadership. Unless there are other questions, commissioners.
How do you get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation? In person?
Why don't you follow up Mrs. Kresser and she can get you a copy of that. This is Mrs. Kresser right here. Okay, well. All right, then commissioners, we have several communications that have been recommended, or several communications by staff recommending various pieces of legislation. Would someone care to make a motion to accept those communications?
Second.
A motion, second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Mrs. Kresser, would you present the consent agenda items? Oh, commissioners, first, I'm sorry. Anyone wish to take any of the consent agenda items and move them to the regular agenda? If not, then Mrs. Kresser, would you proceed, please?
Yes, Mr. President. First item on the consent agenda is an update to the Sandusky Bay Pathway Plan. Second is a payment for the city's enrollment fee to comp management for the 2019 Workers' Compensation Group Retrospective Rating Program. Item C is the purchase and application of Cape Seal and microsurfacing from Strasser Construction. Item D is a resolution adopting the 2019 tax budget. And item E is authorization to dispose of a vehicle no longer needed in the Sandusky Police Department.
Just having heard these communications and recommended pieces of legislation, how do you proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda A through E and declaring that all ordinances and resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions A through E, whether it be in accordance with section 13 or 14 of the city charter.
Second.
And a motion and second, discussion. Mr. Crusher, would you poll the commissioners first on the motion?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinances and resolutions.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Those ordinances and that resolution are adopted. Item number one, please. Item number one.
Item number one is the second reading of a resolution approving the master petition, initial plan for public services, and articles of incorporation for the creation and governance of the downtown Sandusky Special Improvement District Incorporated under Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 1710.
Commissioners, having heard this communication,
Mr. Chairman,
Brady.
I'm not certain of the appropriateness of, or the order that the motion that I'm about to make should fall into, so I will rely on our law department to correct me if I am out of step. But I would like to offer a motion prior to considering this legislation to table this legislation for further review.
Second.
Mr. Haber, the issue is, can we table something before it's been taken up?
The motion to table takes precedent over any other orders.
Okay, all right, very good. So the motion to table is the motion under consideration. It's already been motioned, there's been a motion and a second. I will abstain, as I have on all things related to the SID. To be clear, I have not lobbied my fellow commissioners. I have not lobbied any of you folks. I have remained silent on this issue and will continue to remain silent on this issue. So I won't vote on this motion either. Questions, comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brady.
the purpose of my motion to table is not to indict our city manager, it's to indict our staff. There is part of me that resents the implication from some members of our residents that this was a rigged deal or that this was inappropriate. What I will say is that I believe that your voices should and can and will be heard tonight. And I think that something that is important as this needs further review. And I have always believed in government for and by the people, and I think that is what we're hearing here tonight. But I'm not leaving this room tonight with a feeling that we have been rigging the deck, or that our city manager has done anything, or our staff has done anything unethical or inappropriate. With that said, my motion stands.
Mr. Haberg, I may have made a mistake. Is that a debatable motion?
I guess it is.
I guess it is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I got that in the record, don't I?
You do. Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I was contacted by some of the businesses downtown, and I was down there Saturday when we had to clean up. I was with Mr. Brady, and we kind of looked around. I know they had a change of hands as far as management. I guess someone left last week, Wednesday or Thursday was left. But as I looked around, I'm thinking any job that I would start or want to look at, I'd want to kick ass the first day and put in as much effort as possible. And from what I heard and my walk through downtown, and Mr. Brady was with me, I didn't see that effort there. Maybe a change of management could help. I don't know. I agree with what the comments from Mr. Brady tonight. We talked about this today, talked about a few other commissioners, but this needs to be put under a microscope a little bit further. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twain.
I agree with tabling this motion. The comments tonight were eye-opening. I got a real look into other people's perspective about this motion, this proposal. So I do support tabling this and researching this a little bit more, taking more into consideration what it is that we're trying to achieve with something like this. I do believe in the ability for our community to provide feedback, and then I also agree with the ability for us commissioners to receive that feedback and go back and think about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So I support tabling it.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Gresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Doesn't pass.
So that motion fails.
Correct.
It is not tabled. Commissioners, you have heard the communication from Ms. Gresser. Is there anyone wishing to make a motion to consider that legislation? Then
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lockhart.
the reason that I don't want to table this motion is because this legislation, is because I've heard from numerous residents that they didn't feel comfortable with this legislation, and I believe that legislation shouldn't make its way to the table unless it's fully been vetted through the people. And so to table something that they're not happy with doesn't make sense. What makes sense is getting the input of the people that are here, the people that live in this city, before we put legislation forward. That's the idea. And so, no matter what we do, I don't feel that this is a good tax. I don't feel it's good until the people are comfortable with what they're doing. This is an important issue that involves not just downtown, but everyone. The citizens of Sandusky are paying for this both downtown and outside of downtown with all the funds that we've contributed. And so, for me, I would have to vote this down today. I'm not voting for it to be tabled, nor am I voting for it to be passed today. I think that the questions that they pose haven't been answered today as well. There's about 4 questions are out there about fair market value and the planning concepts and who's responsible for this. Those questions need to be answered even before we vote on it today. And so it seems to me there's a question of notice and input to the residents and input from the residents. And so I'm really concerned about that, and I think this is, I think most things that we're doing are positive. But I will say this to some of the people that make comments today about the city manager. Mr. Wobser is our chief administrator. The buck stops with the commission, the folks at this table. Mr. Wobser's been involved in not just only this project, but many other projects. And we've done a lot of good things in this city, a lot of great things. And so you can't knock a guy down for the one thing that you don't like, but you can come to this commission and hold us accountable. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lockhart. We have this procedure a little bit out of order tonight. That's okay. You wanted to speak, and that's fine. You didn't have a chance to speak for the motion. But if there's no one wishing to make a motion to take up this legislation for passage, we will pass over it, and it will not be taken up tonight. And I want to thank those who have been here to express your opinions for being here. It's always important for us to hear from you. It's not taken up because there is no one wishing to make a motion to consider the legislation.
Well, then what were you tabling? If there was no motion, what did you try to table?
So, Mr. Haber, would you address the question, please?
Right now, we don't have a motion to proceed either way, up or down, so there's nothing to present.
You need to vote.
Well,
There's no table, there's no first, there hasn't been a motion for a first, there hasn't been a motion for a second.
Mr. Chairman, there's one thing though that I'd like to address is the questions that they were asked
Well,
and how they may be answered.
No time for discussion.
if you want to make a motion to take up the legislation, then we can discuss that. But we can't.
Well, what I mean is in the beginning of the meeting, the folks ask
I
questions.
understand.
So you want me to?
Procedurally, that's the only way to motion to. I don't know if they're gonna get a second, but go ahead.
Well, if that's the only way for the folks to have their questions answered, then I'll make that motion. That's what I'm saying. So
So-
I'll make the motion to hear this legislation, or actually to vote on this legislation, if that's the way that you're saying that their opinions.
So let's try something else. Ms. Klein.
Business.
The reason I felt that we should table it because there were a lot of questions tonight. And so that was my reasoning for tabling the issue, because I believe that those questions need to be responded to. I personally, at this table right at this moment, don't have the answer to those questions. And so it's my desire to table it so we could provide answers to those questions. I wrote quite a number of your comments down here, but again, I don't know how to answer those. And so I guess it's my understanding, if there's no motion to take it up and the tabling died, or did not survive, so the motion dies.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I mean, we have to have a motion for a first and a second. It's at the second, if no one seconds it, then it can die. But right now, we don't even have a first
Yeah, right.
in order to have it to die.
So do we have a mechanism to respond to their questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, I think you can hear from her and respond to it. As Mr. President has stated, it's been out of turn the whole night about having discussions before an actual motion. But I think you have a crowded room, so respond to
So Lockhart.
So typically, when someone asks a question at the beginning of the meeting about a particular agenda item, we generally address those when we're at that point in the legislation.
Right.
Right. So in order for them to hear that, I'm willing to make that motion. What if you feel that there's a different mechanism for them to get their questions answered today? I'd be happy to.
So let me try this, since we have the procedure about 7 degrees sideways tonight. Mr. Wobser, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on some of the questions that you were asked, and I'm going to go way out of normal procedure, unless there's an objection by the commissioners, to addressing some of the questions that were posed. And it's fine, we might want to jump in and make sure that all the ones you accounted for are addressed, or maybe they have to be addressed at another meeting. Mr. Wobser.
Certainly.
There's discussion.
Yeah, the
Hold on a
democratic
minute.
process, you didn't,
You didn't table it.
you
Hold on.
shot it down
Mr.
to
President, I
table
think
it,
I
so
can
you
answer
must
the
go
question.
forward.
They might vote again.
Right now,
They're manipulating.
okay, let me respond. Right now, there is no motion to vote on because no one has made an initial motion. There is not a motion to vote on. There has not been an initial motion in order to be seconded. That's why there's no vote taken, and that's why Mr. President has said it'll lie there until someone makes the actual motion and it's actually seconded. Could be.
It just feels
But-
awfully manipulative.
In order to answer the questions, she's turned to Mr. Wooster to allow him to do it.
Mr. Lockhart.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I mean, if they're happy, then I'll make a motion, and we can go however the table wants to do it. In order for people to have their questions answered today, I move that this resolution be passed under, is it a?
Second reading.
Second reading, I'm sorry, under second reading. Well, special improvement district.
There's been a motion, is there a second? Well, it was a valiant try, but there's no second. So we'll go back to the idea I had before. Mr. Wobser, since we are sideways, we've got a lot of folks here, want to take a stab at addressing the questions, or
Yeah, no, I can start.
maybe be able to address some of them as well.
Through the commission president to the commission in the audience, and Mr. Volz, I may ask you to weigh in on a couple of the specific questions. And there was a lot said tonight, so I apologize if I don't get to all the questions, but if people remind me of them, I'll do my best. I'd like to start with the question of transparency. I think that is something that has been a chorus throughout the over the year-long process in which we've been in dialogue with most of these residents personally over the course of that time. I have personally attended, I believe, 3 meetings at the Chesapeake. I know the first meeting we had was with Mr. Earhart and crew at the Hubbard, because I recognize most of the faces from that. I have never shied away from a phone call or an email or a conversation, although sadly I have not had a chance to have that dialogue with people in the time between this, because they haven't reached out until tonight. I would have gladly welcomed those conversations, and in fact, many changes have been made throughout this process so that we could accommodate the concerns of those who have raised them. And I do believe, and Greg, if you could confirm that we did mail a notice of this to every resident. And if something happened that you did not receive those, I apologize, but. Do you want to confirm? Nothing.
Through you, Commission President.
Go online and get the petition.
Mr. Volz.
Through you, Commission President, there was a notice to every property owner based off the auditor's tax mailing address sent to every property owner. It wasn't the entire petition. It was a notice that this was occurring and that they could reach out to Fergus Consulting Downtown Sandusky, Inc. to get the full petition. It was not costly to send, it was very costly to send out a full petition to every property owner.
Mr.
So,
Wilson.
and we've provided that petition to everyone that is requested, and again, taken meetings. So I personally feel that nearly everyone in this room was involved in the process, and ultimately,
Hey, folks, give Mr. Wobser a chance to speak, please.
this is, what we have here is disagreement with the path that the city has taken. And oftentimes when there's disagreement with substance, process is put forward as the reasoning for the disagreement. I believe there is a real disagreement as to the substance of what we're proposing tonight. And ultimately, I think that is what we're hearing, maybe masquerading as process more than actual process concerns. I think the concerns with the substance are as such. I know Mr. Earhart and others raised the boundaries that exist. We did adjust those boundaries numerous times in ways that tried to provide both a contiguous district, certainly one that could pass, and ultimately one that we could provide services to. And a lot of the choices I think that folks are stating were gerrymandered to provide support or to draw more city property in were actually done so that we could provide services to those areas based on current and future projects proposed at those places. And so, and
Hey,
again,
please, let Mr. Wobser speak.
So I will continue, but we did make changes to the boundaries, and I think we've been transparent as to why those changes were made. And again, I think reasonable people can disagree with why they exist, and I know that the folks at the Chesapeake, based on several conversations, were frustrated that they continued to be included, and they would have rather have been drawn out. I can say that a great deal of the city property could be removed from this, and we would still be well above the 60% threshold. Not all of the property, but we're well over 50% without the city's inclusion at all. And if you count properties of folks who said, and I think that's another point that I'd like to debate a little bit, is it was stated that 80% of the properties were a no. The reality is, no, sir, please. The reality is many of the properties that didn't sign yes have stated that they didn't oppose it, and many of the others we simply just didn't hear back at all. So I don't think you can count someone who didn't sign as an affirmative no, but we're well over 70%. We're well over 70% included in the district when you count the amount that is there. And I think, again, for residents, I know Mr. Delahunt raised issues about why residents are treated differently and that theirs go up. We actually made adjustments, and I think that herein lies the biggest challenge to improvement districts generally in Ohio. Under the law, we made adjustments so that residents paid a lower rate than commercial properties, because residential property on a per square footage or valuation basis generally appraises higher than commercial property. And in the last improvement districts, both in downtown Cleveland and Ohio City that I was involved in, they tried to make adjustments to help offset the contribution that residents can make. It is very difficult under the way that the Ohio law is set up to totally adjust in a way that can account for the fact that residents don't pay disproportionately more in these. So we tried to make some accommodations that also allowed this to go forward. We know that many of the residents were upset with that, but again, not in a non-transparent way. We had those conversations. We decided that the investments that we were making into downtown comprehensively would benefit from the improvement district, and that ultimately the properties, even if some people disagreed, would get more value from being a part of the district over time as property values increased. Well, and again, what I can say to this too is, and part of the part that was most disappointing to me in what I've heard is most of these meetings that I show up and there's an angry crowd, it is people from the rest of the city complaining about how much we've invested in downtown. It's about the contributions that we have made for 12 vacant buildings to be completely revitalized in the downtown, for over 30 new businesses to open in your downtown, for property values rising in your very building that we've been tracking very carefully over the past year, ultimately for the marketing that now benefits downtown that didn't exist before, for the over $15 million in infrastructure investment that's planned in your downtown, for a $20 million Bowling Green State University and Cedar Fair facility for a headquarters to be built in the middle of your downtown. We have invested significantly into the downtown district. We often hear great complaints from the rest of the city about that would happen. And so someone asked about the strategic plan and wanting to see it. I can tell you that the improvement district is mentioned in the strategic plan that was passed unanimously 2.5 years ago. I can also tell you that that's part of a comprehensive plan for your downtown that includes an improvement district, it includes investments in revitalizing vacant buildings, it includes attracting new businesses, new residents, and this is one important step that we believed was part of that overall process. I believe that your properties are the greatest beneficiary of investments downtown, and I can also say this, that it was mentioned that you pay 99.2% of your property taxes to the city. I agree, and I think you're beneficiaries from that respect, and that every other property that pays taxes to the city has 82% of those dollars immediately go to the school district. I know the Hubbard building and the Chesapeake building don't have a lot of students in the Sandusky City schools. You actually get to see the value of your tax dollars being spent immediately around your very building. We have $14 million in planned investment on Shoreline Drive and the Jackson Street Pier that will dramatically improve your property values, in addition to having redone East Water Street. So what I will say is this, we made choices, but we were transparent about the choices that we made. We have and will continue to invest in downtown. I am disappointed in the process arguments or the personal attacks that have been made against me and other staff people as part of this, because we work very hard to support the entire city and not just the downtown. But that being said, you have heard, your voices have been heard throughout this process. the commission is deciding to either table or to not support this tonight, we're happy to have a continued dialogue, and I hope that we can do a better job of explaining to you the great investments that we have made to benefit your property, and that we feel a great sense of momentum in downtown, in part because of those investments. So I hope that we can continue to have a professional relationship as it relates to the fair market value or the frontage questions that came up tonight. Greg can speak specifically as to why some of those choices were made. I know some of those are dictated by the law, but others were choices. But Greg, if you can speak to that.
I believe at the beginning, when we first had a public meeting last summer in the library, which also everyone was notified about via the text on the auditor's website, it was discussed that it would be assessed value. The difference would be, if it was assessed value, it'd be a much higher percentage, so it'd be around, I think the discussion was 5.5% or something along those lines. Total market value was just a simpler way to do it, and that's why it's dropped down to the 0.14 some percent or 15%, and that's why that occurred. I think there's a discussion on abatements. It would be whatever is the total market value line on the auditor's site. That is what the assessment would be based off of.
All right, so folks, hold on. So we've had a long debate about this. We are a long way sideways. We are a long way, ma'am, would you please wait? We have had a lot of discussion tonight. We are all neighbors. A lot of us are friends in the same community. Let's leave that away tonight. This is not being voted on tonight. And if it's going to be voted on at any point in the future, and that's not a sure thing, it's going to be put back on an agenda. So if we, folks, you had a chance to speak. I gave staff a chance to respond. We have a lot of items of business we have to take up tonight. We're going to do that next. If you wish to speak to this issue again, at the end of the meeting, you are perfectly permitted to do so. All right, Mr. Cresser, would you present item number 2, please?
Item 2 is an ordinance amending the official zone map of the city of Sandusky to establish a transient occupancy overlay district and declaring that this ordinance shall take effect under suspension of the rules as contained in and in accordance with section 13 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules in full accordance with section 13 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Ms. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance, or I'm sorry, on the resolution.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes,
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
that is adopted. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional design services with Environmental Design Group LLC of Akron, Ohio for the landing project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, why don't you walk us through this major piece of legislation?
Yes, Mr. President, Commission, and residents, this is the landing project. It was a project that started with a conceptual design process about 1.5 years ago. The final conceptual project, the final conceptual plan was approved, voted on by City Commission at the end of 2017. So it's actually very quick and very aggressive, in my opinion, to already be coming back here for a plan of this magnitude, to be bringing it to the design phase, which is pretty exciting. And what I'd like to say is I know there were several questions that came up, and I don't have all those answers, so I might have to defer to the city manager, to Director Soloway. EDG is here as well, and they might be able to answer some of those questions. So if anybody has those, I can defer to that. The conceptual design goes from Cedar Point Drive all the way to the landing to the eastern corporation limit within the city. It is not the entire Sandusky Bay pathway. It is just that portion that goes from Cedar Point Drive, includes a bridge over Pipe Creek, goes along the old Pier Track right-of-way, and then it's the property on the north side of the existing Sports Force facility and the future Sports Center Phase 2 expansion. Those properties are owned by one of three, those properties to the north there are owned by one of three entities, typically Cedar Point, the Erie Metro Parks, and the city of Sandusky. We have been in discussions with each of them. As everybody knows, those entities were involved in the original planning effort. So moving forward with the design, the question of why such a large price tag for design, typically what we like to consider is about 10% of the construction cost, somewhere to 10 to 12% is about the maximum that we typically like to see. And the original cost estimate for the phases of the project that are included here was about 16 million. That did not include lighting, that did not include utilities, sewer and water, those types of things. So with that extra couple million for those, that's about 18 million, which this project puts us right at 12%. So now we're including those utilities, the water and sewer, we're extending the gas, extending the power, those types of things as part of this project. But not only that, I've been doing environmental projects for about 18 years now. And I would say that this is probably the most diverse, most complex environmental project with the most permitting and the most coordination with federal, state, and local agencies, that we're spending over $300,000 in just the environmental and permitting portion of it to make sure that we're doing everything right. We're not we're not negatively impacting any of that environmental habitat. We're also, because the portion of the project mainly on the pier track, part of that's privately owned, the majority of it's privately owned. We have quite a significant amount of geotechnical and survey and acquisition involved in this project. So even though we're at 12%, about 25% of the entire cost of the project is with the environmental permitting, the acquisition, and those types of things, which is significantly more than a normal project. As far as what the money can be used for, how we're paying for this project, the design piece is being paid for with the future proceeds from the TIF. So that money is going to be paid for that TIF. And what I'd like to take a quick second to read what that TIF was set up for. The TIF was approved in April of 2018 for planning, engineering, legal, acquisition, construction, and installation for public improvements. And those public improvements are related to trails, recreational paths, streets, water, sewer lines, acquisition, and any other real estate type project that directly benefits the parcels associated with that TIF. And those parcels within that TIF are in and around that Sandusky, that sports center facility. So this project directly benefits that, and it's the intent of those dollars to be used for a project just like this. It can't be used for projects that might be paving something somewhere else that doesn't directly benefit those parcels. So at this time, I would be willing to take any questions, and if anybody else has any, I might have to defer to some that I might not be able to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, questions or comments for Mr. Klein or other members of staff? Mr. Soloway or Mr. Wobser, comment was made regarding this property being tax abated. In fact, Cedar Fair is paying the full value of the taxes because that's what funds the TIF. It's there. The ordinance uses the word abatement, but it's an abatement of the taxes that are paid to the school district, but it's still the full amount of the taxes that end up being paid into the TIF.
It's more of a reallocation of the resources, probably the best way to think of it.
Okay, that gets a little confusing, but thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Klein.
One more question that I believe was brought up about the city paying for Cedar Point's portion and for the Metro Parks portion, I believe. What I would say is that we're still in discussions with the Metro Parks about their involvement, how they would be involved. In the Cedar Point portion, they are doing the road that would go from State Route 6 back to the north side of the Sports Center Phase 2. They are paying for any of the widening within that State Route 6. They also, the private portion, which were the buildings on the northeast side, that's not included in this. That would be a private portion that Cedar Point would be involved in. So the only portion that the TIF dollars would be going to is that public improvement portion, not the private pieces or the private portions of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Could you give us a timeline?
Jesus, that would
I know there's a lot of work to be done, but can you give us a rough idea?
I would say that the timeline to start, I've been getting pushed by EDG because they want to make sure they get out there right away. The timeline for completion of the design, we're still working out those details. Within 2 weeks, I'll have that. I'll make sure I update the manager's report. I would defer to EDG if you guys have a preliminary schedule of.
Ms. Johnson, do you have an idea?
The answer is it depends, and I apologize about that. With the permitting right now, we have 11 environmental permits that we have to clear with the potential for 6 more on top of that. So if a individual permit is triggered for this, the timeline is exponentially longer. We basically get to a point in the design process where we just have to sit and wait for all the regulatory agencies to process the paperwork, which will essentially be also 18 months. That being said, that leads us into a 2-ish year design timeline. If we can avoid a full-on individual 401, 404 permit and trigger just a portion of that, and we end up doing a nationwide permit, that triggers a year to a year and a half timeline on the design. So depending on where those permittings go on that due diligence and what's triggered and what actually has to be permitted versus the paperwork that has to be furnished and produced, the answer is 1 year to 2 years roughly.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 4, please.
Item 4 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed city-owned fiber extension project and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine?
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second discussion. Hamilton, we have a couple of pieces of legislation on the agenda tonight. Might want to take a moment just to walk the commission and the public through what it is that we're taking a look at tonight.
Through you, Mr. President. As part of the City Hall lease, the city was left with certain responsibilities logistically and financially. The next 3 agenda items that I'm covering are all covered under that. It's our responsibility to fulfill. Agenda item number 4 is requesting to bid to extend our fibre optic cable from here to the new city building. All our offsites connect back to here for all data and phone needs. We need to extend that usage down to New City Hall. It's a pretty basic project, but it's a specialised trade, so we need to put that one out to bid. Item number 5 is to basically run all the network cabling in the new City Hall. So that'll be cabling to point of use, there'll be fibre optics between floor to floor, all communication racks and communication equipment that we need to bring up the new City Hall. That will put the building in a state where we can basically migrate with 0 downtime from here to there when it's time to move. On 5 and 6, I added a 10% variance warning on these projects. These projects just due to the fact that it's a fluid project in itself. I just want people to be aware as the building options change, some of these designs may have to change on the way through. The rewiring is a total of $47,737. Agenda item number 6 is the communication for the new city security solution from Johnson Controls. This will be a fully integrated security system. This will cover the videos inside and exterior to the building, door controls. This will enable us to see everything that's going on within the building in one place. That's one thing that we lack in the city at this point. With the help of the police chief going through some needs for the new building, this will be the base of how we design our security systems for the rest of the city from here on out, so we can actually see what's going on within and without the city. This agenda item is a total of $157,396, and again with a 10% variance warning on that one also.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Commissioners, questions or comments? Mr. Hamilton or otherwise? If not, then thank you, sir. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 5, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Ohio Telecom Incorporated of Port Clinton, Ohio, for professional services for the City Hall Physical Network Infrastructure Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Hamilton, of course, just presented this and the next one. If not, then Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine? Yes. Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. And finally, item 6, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Johnson Control Incorporated of Cleveland, Ohio, for professional services for the City Hall Security System Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on this last of Mr. Hamilton's items?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 7, please.
Item 7 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to approve the first and final change order for work performed by Rising Sun Company LLC of Mansfield, Ohio, for the West Market Street Sewer Replacement Project in the amount of $16,921.45, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Twine?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Ms. Klein, can you give us a brief understanding of what it is that's driving this change order, please?
Yes, Mr. President. As with any underground project, there's always unknowns that you're going to encounter once you take the surface off. And in this case, we cambered the existing sewers, and it looked like a normal sewer, just in really, really bad shape. But when we started digging, it turned out that the sewer was not going straight. It was actually turning very gradually to one side. So as we went through the excavation, we not only had to remove the existing sewer, but we also, or the existing sewer that was curving, but we also had to lay the new sewer straight to make sure that we could have those direct connections and we could clean it in the future and maintain it properly. So The extra cost on this one is for the backfill, the hauling of the spoil material for the larger extra excavation, and those types of normal construction costs to make sure that we got the sewer up to city standards.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, questions or comments? Mr. Klein, I know today we use the GIS system to make sure that we leave very clear set of records for future generations in terms of exactly where things are underground. They didn't have that kind of technology back then. Mr. Waddington maintains, although I don't know if it's true, that there's still a wooden water line underneath the city sometime that was put in when Abraham Lincoln was president, but I don't think you've encountered that one, have you?
I have not.
Okay. We'll see. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 8, please.
Item number 8 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase a 2019 Ram 1500 quad cab ST 4x4 truck from Sherry Chrysler of Piqua, Ohio, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program for the Engineering Division, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
Item number 9 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase a 2018 Ford F-50 4x4 regular chassis cab truck with dump body from Lebanon Ford Commercial of Lebanon, Ohio, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program for the Water Distribution Division, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Then a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 10, please.
Item 10 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase a 2018 Ford F-50 4x4 regular chassis cab truck with dump body from Lebanon Ford Commercial of Lebanon, Ohio, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program for the Sewer Maintenance Division, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Then a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on this motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
On the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 11, please.
Item 11 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Environmental Design Group of Akron, Ohio, for professional services and preparation of a grant application to the United States Department of Transportation for financial assistance through the Build Discretionary Grant Application for the Sandusky Bay Pathway, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Byington, could you explain this legislation for us and for the folks back home too?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of commission. Authorization is being requested to enter into a contract with EDG for professional services to complete a build discretionary transportation grant and then to submit it. The application request would be up to $25 million, and the funds would be used for the construction of the Sandusky Bay Pathway. There is no required match, but the city would propose a 25% match, which would make our application much more aggressive and looked on favorably. So for example, if the city of Sandusky were to be funded the full $25 million, which is the maximum you can request, our match at 25% would be $7.8 million, which would give us a total project cost of $31.25 million. They could also approve a lesser amount. So another example would be if they approved $7.5 million of grant funds, the local match would be $2.5 million, which would create a $10 million project. So it is a very aggressive application. It's very technical. The cost of the service to EDG to complete this would be $45,000. It's proposed that $9,500 be paid from Issue 8 capital project funds, Parks and Recreation, and $35,500 from Parks and Recreation capital project funds. If the city would not be funded in this round, this application has, the majority of the material could be used again for the next round. So we're requesting that authorization be provided under Section 14 of the city charter as the grant application is due by July 19th.
Thank you, Ms. Byington. Commissioners, questions or comments? This is a lot of money to spend to write a grant application, but it's a lot of money that's at stake. And I can also predict with 100% certainty that if we don't apply, we're not going to get that funding. So I do support this. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 12, please.
Item 12 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to expend additional funds to the Sandusky City School District for reimbursement of additional services necessary for the green infrastructure improvements at the new Hayes Intermediate School property and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, to your point earlier about never knowing what's underground, maybe you could explain to us, because we looked at this legislation before, it's a lower ticket item, but you're recommending it because it still makes a lot of financial sense, but explain the captain.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. So at the Sandusky City School project, just north of the high school for the intermediate school, we had requested $13,500 previously to redirect the stormwater from their existing parking lot to the new storm green infrastructure that they're going to have along Hayes Avenue. The ideal situation, which is what we believed to have been out there, was that the storm sewer was on the north side of the entranceway, and that the sanitary sewer was on the south side of the entranceway, that northern entranceway by the school. Well, because those are laterals, those are services for the school, those are private, we don't have records on exactly where they are. And the school believed that it was in those locations as well. Well, when they got to digging, it turned out that the sanitary was on the north and the storm was on the south. So the only way to direct that flow to the green infrastructure is going to be to lower the sanitary because they were at the exact same elevation. So unfortunately, this is the only way to get the project to succeed. And before we went through with it, we went back to the drawing board to say, is this still a financial benefit to the city? And the original estimates, if you remember, the goal is to be below $0.36 $36 per gallon of green infrastructure. And the original estimate was under 1 cent, so that was a huge savings on future investments. The new cost is about 4 cents per gallon, so we're still 32 cents per gallon below, which is still a very good investment. Unfortunately, we're not at that 1 cent that we were at before. So,
Thank you, Mr. Klein. I understand part of the expense is due to the fact that I guess we're not certain to incur this, but it's built in that if we do run into bedrock, because there is a lot of bedrock in that area, then we bear that expense. If it turns out it's not bedrock, then it's something less.
yes, the contractors found bedrock at about 2 feet at some locations, so this covers the entire thing, so hopefully it'll be significantly less. And I can let you know what that number is when it comes in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Klein. Additional questions or comments, commissioners? Ms. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. That completes our regular items of business. For all the folks here, we have a couple more things in the city manager's report, then old business and new business, and then that's all of you who still wish to speak. Wilson.
Thank you, commissioners, audience, and staff. I will start with the donations. First, a donation of $75 to the Sandusky Police Department was received from the Sandusky Memorial Day Association. I'd ask for a motion to approve that donation.
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Ken, a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks.
Thank you. Also, a donation of $75 to the Sandusky Fire Department was received from the Sandusky Memorial Day Association. I'd also ask for a motion to approve that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Again, with our thanks.
A donation of $30 was received thanking firefighters for helping Citizen Change or Flat Tire. They're paying it forward and will be donating this to a local food shelter. I'd also ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved.
Finally, a donation of an outdoor life-size Jenga set that is inscripted with Sandusky 2018 Bicentennial branding was received from Steve Spriggs. I'd ask for a motion to accept that in-kind donation.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. No objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks to Mr. Spriggs.
Moving on to new and old business. For the police department, Sergeant Susanna coordinated the torch run for the Special Olympics on June 17th. We thank her for her continued commitment and passion for the Special Olympic athletes. Also, the fire department will be delivering lunches daily to the kids for the duration of the playground program. A big thank you to the Salvation Army for supplying those lunches. Moving on to finance. The 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is on schedule to be filed with the Government Finance Officers Association by the June 30th deadline. And now some positive and exciting news. The online utility bill pay portal is now live. And with that, I'd like to thank Director Soloway for his work on bringing that to fruition and turn it over to him for a brief remarks.
If time permits, we wanted to just pull it up real quick on the website just to show people
Sure.
where to go. We're
Yeah.
not actually gonna pay them bill, but we're just gonna show people where to actually go and direct them. So what you wanna do is get to our city website and then in Stewart's coordinating. As you scroll down, you'll see the big bright orange button there, view or pay your bill online. So you're gonna wanna click on that. It'll redirect you to the Invoice Cloud portal. Once you're there, you have two options. You have a pay now one time where you do not have to register. It's quick and easy. Give your account number and you pay your utility bill. And that's the option on the left. The option on the right, the register now, that will has extended features, as it indicates on the screen, where you'll have the ability to receive your utility bills, basically your utility bills monthly online instead of getting a hard copy in the mail. And it has more features where it'll maintain those bills for up to a year, so you can kind of have all your data will be right there, quick and easy. So this is up and live today, so residents can use it as soon as they want to. So we're excited that it's up and running, and I want to thank Stu for his help in helping us get where we're at today. I know it's something we've been all looking forward to doing for quite some time. So
Yeah, congratulations on finally getting that done. It has been a long slog to get there, so it's good.
Yeah, here.
thank you.
Thank you, Director Soloway and Stewart. Moving on to Public Works, staff is requesting qualifications through the normal RFQ process for the Sandusky Bay Pathway Detailed Design. Qualification packets will be due Monday, July 9th, 2018. Also, staff is requesting proposals for the normal RFP process for combined sewer system flow monitoring, with proposals being due Monday, July 9th, 2018. And staff would also like to remind developers and prospective purchasers that the city has federal brownfield funds available for environmental site assessments, which are typically required prior to purchasing property. Please contact the Public Works Department at 419-627-5829 for more information. Also, the contractor has made great progress at the intersection of Monroe Street and Gartland Avenue and still plans to open the road after construction ends this week, barring unforeseen circumstances. We know there have been some inconveniences in the closures of that and the railroad traffic, but they have done their absolute best to maintain whenever possible traffic and to get that project done quickly. Also, the Sandusky Masonic Science Lodge, in conjunction with Balcony Monuments, will be dedicating a 24 by 36 by 4 section of granite to the city at 1 p.m. during the annual Stars and Stripes celebration on July 4th at the Washington Park gazebo. This stone will be installed flush with the sidewalk in front of the entrance to the new City Hall when we are closer to relocating to the downtown offices. Residential tax abatement. On June 16th, 2018, the city received correspondence from the Ohio Development Services Agency formally accepting and approving the city's petition for the creation of a citywide community reinvestment area. The designation will permit the city to offer real estate tax abatement at 10 years, 75% on the value of improvements will be abated. Citywide for physical improvements to their properties that contain 3 or less units. The department will be working over the next few weeks to formalize this application process and plan to formally roll out and open the program in mid to late summer. Also, Ohio Historic Preservation tax credits. The city of Sandusky received 2 of only 31 awards made statewide. The projects include the Fike Building, which received a $2 million credit to assist in the $14 million renovation being undertaken by Vintage Development. Once completed, this project will include approximately 66 new apartment units in ground floor commercial space, as well as the B. Myler Building, also known as the future home of Lake Erie Shores and Islands, which received $184,500 in credits to assist in the $1 million renovation being undertaken by Renaissance 2 LLC. Once completed, this project will house Lake Erie Shores and Islands and 2 residential units on the upper floors. I want to thank the Development Department for their hard work on shepherding those projects and working with those developers to achieve those tax credits. It's pretty unprecedented, honestly, the amount of historic tax credits we've received from the state over the last 2 years for a city of our size. So I hope the audience can take note of that as well. Also, the Planning Department, the regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 27th at 4:30 p.m. in the first floor conference room. The regular Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 21st at 4:30 p.m. Also, a Landmark Commission meeting is scheduled for June 28th at 4:30 p.m. And the Sandusky Transit System will be hosting a public meeting on Thursday, June 28th at 5 p.m. at the Sandusky Fire Station. The topic will be the elimination of 4 stops on the Spark 3 route that are underutilized, and the addition of 2 new stops on the same route at Holy Angels Church and Maytag Home Laundry. Also, discussion will include some minor route adjustments necessary for the downtown transit hub located in front of the Social Security building. I have a note here. Let me try to decipher this. To mention that there's going to be a south side cleanup on July 7th at 9 a.m. with the location of New Jerusalem Church. So once again, a cleanup at New Jerusalem Church on July 7th at 9 a.m. And I don't know, am I supposed to read this? What's this? That's not me. Okay. Okay, that concludes my remarks for this evening. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Kelly gave me an extra sheet of paper.
Questions or comments for the city manager?
I have a question regarding.
Wait a minute, ma'am, you'll be able to speak at the end of the meeting. Mr. Wobser, you've been doing an incredible job running the city. And it's not just you, it's a lot of great staff people. When we're moving as quickly as we are, we're going to run into disagreements from time to time. I appreciate the folks who came tonight to speak in a respectful manner. I do not appreciate the comments that undermine and question Mr. Wobser's integrity and honesty. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's founded. We've done a great job as a city of running out a lot of city managers. Let's not do that. Let's recognize that he's doing a lot of good. His staff is doing a lot of good. The city's in a much better place than it was 4 years ago when he came here. We're going to have disagreements. That's fine. Commission's going to make changes in direction from time to time because of public input. That's fine. That's how it should be. Let's always be respectful. We don't want to be like the people in D.C. We don't want to be like the people who are in Columbus too often. We live in a community where we are friends and neighbors, and it's important to keep that in mind. That's what makes us special, and that's what makes us community. So thank you for your leadership of the city, Mr. Wobser.
Likewise.
Additional questions or comments for the manager? And we will turn to old business. Anyone have any items of old business?
Mr. Chairman,
Warrington.
I'm hopeful at some point in July that we can do that rededication at the Colorado Cemetery. We had talked about that before. I stopped over there this past weekend and walked, it looks really good. I think we just got the sign to put back up, but I'd like to do that. It's been since 1968 when we went over last year, rediscovered, I guess. The sign's been repainted. The centerpiece is real nice. They got the butterfly bee garden there, looks really good. Grass looks, it's at least it's being well kept up right now, I guess. That's part, so. Like to do something in July, maybe on some evening,
Okay.
if we could do a,
Let's pick a
because we
date,
had
put
talked
one on the
about
calendar.
I'll let our clerk do that. She can pick a date.
Okay. Who would do that?
If Kelly could pick a date, I'd like to
Okay.
have all the commissioners, you know.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Because it's part of, our history, the city, bicentennial, things. I just think it'd be neat. Follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner. Additional items of old business? Any items of new business?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bodies?
at Saturday's meeting, which you attended with me, our coffee at the commission, and Mr. Brady was there, that Tiffany Ave, and I agree with Ms. Johnson, it looks terrible. We've done cleanings below there, as far as trash and that. I just wonder if we could get that on our radar, maybe some painting or something along that line. Just lighting and maybe painting under there. It looks really bad. It's an entryway in the, our community from the west. I just think all the other underpasses or subways are all pretty well cleaned up. I think that one needs some attention. I'm not saying in 6 months or a year, but it's
sure,
gotta
sure.
be on the radar at some point.
We'll talk, look in the capital planning.
I think it is in the cap, is it somewhere in the capital plan, Mr. Klein, not in the 5 years?
No, nothing
Okay.
like that.
All right, okay.
We'll look at it.
Okay, additional items of new business. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to read something here. So, the June 11 replay of the Sandusky City Commission meetings did not take place. I'm sorry, let me read it right. The June 11 replays of the Sandusky City Commission meeting did not take place on Buckeye Cablevision. Buckeye is working through changing out equipment and taking care of these issues so that it does not happen again. Meetings are always available online, that one included. There's a link from the City Commission webpage, or you can go directly to YouTube to see that particular meeting if you didn't have a chance to catch it. Other items of new business. Now we turn to audience participation.
We did see that meeting, and we're very surprised, as none of the residents had noticed that the amount of petitions had been received and that it was going to be presented, and that's why no one was here. We watched that. And we also watched Mr. Poole ask some questions, which indicated that he, as a commissioner, was not well informed about what the statistics about who voted for it and the footage and the tax value was done. So just for some education, Mr. Murray, can you tell me the three choices to fund a SID by Ohio Revised Code?
Ma'am, I cannot speak to the SID. I've said this many times.
Mr. Wobser, can you tell me the three methods you could choose to?
Ma'am, this is a time where you can
Okay.
speak your mind.
Well, Ohio Revised Code 727.01 says there's three ways you can fund a SID. One is by the way you chose, by your tax value. Two is a very subjective, by the proportion of benefits that may result. And three, Section C, is by the front footage of the property. So it was a choice that you made to assess us by our front footage, but make us pay by our tax value. You could have had us pay by our front footage, but you didn't want to do that because there's $34 million of value in the Chesapeake, and they only had 440 feet to vote. So they wouldn't have paid much. Now, a rational, reasonable person would say, well, why did you pick that funding method? Because you can get a lot of money from other people that way. Because the city would have had to pay for 4,000 feet and the Chesapeake 400. But that's not going to get you much money to play with and to run your board with 2 residential members, 3 members from the business, and 2 from the city. So you have 7 members, 2 residents. The residents kick in all the money, but you get to say what happens with it. Now, a rational person says, wonder how many residents are for that. So your consultant last week didn't say, hey, these were all business except three residential units, which also owned commercial property. You had 0 residential standalone owners out of more than 200 that didn't get a petition, didn't sign. So that's a no. That's not maybe a no, that's a no. They didn't petition for this. This is rammed through by the city and the businesses, and there's also something else. Ohio Revised Code 1710.06A states that the Board of Directors of a SID may adopt a written plan for improvements or services that benefit all or any part of the district. Notice that word, it's any part. So this board gets to choose who gets the money. Well, you think the residents are going to get a say in how that happens? No. Residents will pay for the care or improvement of favored commercial and government-owned properties as voted by the board. Also, that revised code number 1710.06A5 states that the board may pass the costs of issuing, paying interest on, or redeeming notes and bonds issued for public funding improvements or public service plans. So you can't tell me you're going through this whole thing just to hire a couple custodians for downtown. Give me a break. This is just a little window so that you can get in there and make us in debt, issue bonds for whatever you decide to do, and then that's going to be a lien on my property when I go to sell it. And I have to give special improvement documents to the person within 5 days of them accepting an offer for them to buy my property. So you think that's going to improve my property value? You're crazy. You know, we take care of our property well. We didn't, since I bought down there 13 years ago, we didn't get any grants. We didn't get new windows in our building for grants. We didn't go in somewhere and say, you can have some grant money if you sign our SID. We didn't do any of that. Did you? We don't know. We don't know what backdoor deals are made between these commercial things and the city, or what promises are made about where this money's going. You've done a great job. The city looks good, except it's not very well swept, but the development is good. But sometimes power goes to your head and you get too far. You get too much. You get government overreach. You think Mr. Orzek over there is going to find somebody for fishing and smoking on Jackson Street Pier? Are you kidding me? I'm not a smoker. I treat people who die from smoking. But people have a right to smoke. And I don't care if somebody's out there fishing and smoking a cigar. This is government overreach. It's gone too far.
Thank you, ma'am.
I agree.
Mr. Zulaw.
Mike Zolhoff, I live on 243 East Market Street. I want to commend the city staff and the city manager's office for, in particular, the success with the Fike building. It's going on 2 decades now when the city decided to buy the Chesapeake and promote it for redevelopment. And that was, nobody believed it was going to happen. Even when it was happening, nobody believed it was going to happen. And it turned out to be transformative and a huge benefit to downtown, getting 200 market residential units within 2 blocks of our downtown. So the Fike building is arguably even more important. It's not just a great to have, it's an imperative, because the alternative would be the decay of an 8-story building surrounded by 3-story buildings in the middle of your downtown. It's so important. We should be celebrating this, the success of this administration and of the developer for recognizing the potential of the fantastic building. And I think we have something to be excited about. So again, commendations for that success.
Thank you, Ms. Zulaw.
Yes, I'll go Matt Earhart, 105 West Water.
Meet you there, sir, but you're.
Oh, shoot. Come on, Uncle Dudley.
Well, you need to step to the microphone.
My question's a
No,
whole
no.
lot different.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I want to thank you guys for tabling or whatever you did. You know, at least you didn't vote it through. I don't know what it is. But related to that, I would like to see a legal explanation as to how a commission can legally not vote on an agenda legislative item that failed a commission motion to table. So that's my question, please. And a couple others. You mentioned that I threw that 89% number out there. So, again, and Kelly was nice enough to send me the spreadsheet that showed me all the owners and then every parcel. And I actually went through and took, the Hubbard building had about 4 parcels in it that were doubled up, so I took those out. They had like 4 units in there at 16.5 feet, but those were just doubled up, like Nancy's unit over there, it's 5.5, all of ours are 5.5, but there was 4 that said 16.5, so I took that footage out. The city had, on your petition, Eric, it had a 200-foot submission for the Keller building lot, but Case Development also submitted the same parcel number for the Keller building lot. So I took that footage out. So the footage, well, the number of owners, again, 237 district owners of 381 parcels. 212 owners did not send a petition, so we voted no. So 212 divided by 237 is 89.5% no vote owners, okay, of 271 parcels. There was 25 owners of 38 properties, 38 parcels that signed a petition. So it's 25 yes owners and 212 no owners for a total of 237. So that's where I came up with the numbers. I just want to explain that to you. The issue is the disproportionate, hugely disproportionate tax to be paid by the 89.5% no vote owners. That is huge to us. Doesn't seem fair. It's not fair. And again, when we look at the district, I have a couple questions about the district. Number 1, why is Crable not in? Number 2, why was a line drawn directly around the Variety Village 200-foot parking lot, came back, and then, so that's the corner of, help me, Hancock and Market, across from Farmers Market. Okay, so why was that strip added in? I would really like to know the reason why. And then when the line comes back from Crable across the street, it goes right past Paddle Climb and down that alleyway. Doesn't go any farther east, right down that alleyway and then back. The reason I need to know the answers to those questions is because gerrymandering is defined as a practice intended to establish a political advantage for a particular party or group by manipulating district boundaries. That is the definition of gerrymandering. Lastly, I'll say that, okay, we have a disagreement. You understand our disagreement? So, yeah, I mean, let's work together. We'll say hi in the street, so forth. But remember, when you're getting into the pockets of all the people that started the resurgence to begin with, Susie purchased that property from Dan Delhunt. That was the first major property purchase 13 years ago in that building. Chesapeake wasn't done yet. I think the owner of Chesapeake was sick. We didn't know if it was gonna get finished, and we watched the windows and the balconies go up at the Chesapeake. I think that Zinc, I think downtown had the Zinc, Dailies. Zinc was there. I think the Zinc was there, but that's my opinion. The Zinc, Dailies, had Cabana Jacks, and maybe a couple. Club X and a Crowbar, maybe, I think, something like that. But, you know, 2 or 3 decent establishments, 1 top-of-the-line establishment. You know, some rough around the edges, but the city has come around, and you guys have really done that, so thank you. I mean, I understand that. But again, people that are coming in to benefit, the businesses are benefiting. They're gonna make money. Their tax goes up a little bit. Ours goes up, I think, $445. Nikki's goes up $175. I mean, that's just an example, but it's the truth. It's the data that's on the Erie County website for auditors, for valuation and the percentages that are applied.
Mr. Earhart, I don't like
So-
cutting people off, but.
What's that? You're cutting me off?
I don't like
All right.
cutting people off, but I was gonna ask you to wrap it
All
up.
right. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, sir, you had, step to the microphone, please.
I got another question. I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but about 2 years ago, I got a letter in the mail about some property that we own on Campbell Street. It told us that we needed to paint our dormers and our garage and that, which is a 4-square brick house. Are they still doing this in different districts? Are they requiring people to do this?
Yes, sir.
I am not seeing it. That's why I'm saying we did ours right away, which is no problem.
We have significantly increased our code enforcement staff and the number of citations and the number of prosecutions. And yes, we are doing it more aggressively than ever.
I mean, I'm going by houses,
It's not every house every year.
I know,
We do it by zones.
but I go down Sycamore.
Or by complaint, file a complaint.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, I go down Sycamore Line and I see curtains, shower curtains on windows and stuff that looks like heck. When our house was in perfect shape, it looked good, just needed a little paint, which we did. I just, you just have to wait until that district comes around in order to send out the letters?
Or someone files a complaint.
Okay. Well, I don't think anybody filed a complaint.
I got a notice last year on a rental property I have.
You have what?
I got a notice on a rental property that I own with my hand.
So you got a letter too?
I did, yeah, not some gutters.
I'm just wondering if it was still going, that's all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street. You said you were having trouble with the YouTube showing. So June 11th didn't air, is that correct?
Yes, it's Buckeye Cable that had the trouble. It's still on YouTube.
It's still unresolved?
No, Buckeye Cable was the one that had the trouble. It's still up on YouTube.
Okay, so this meeting will air on YouTube then, guaranteed?
It's there permanently. You've got to go.
Okay, usually when there's a hot topic like this, it conveniently disappears, you know? So I'm just checking.
That's neither true nor fair.
Come on, Sharon.
Wow.
Come on.
Bob Reardon, 401 West Shoreline Drive, Unit 351. Again, one more time, I hate to belabor this point, but I'd like to know, where are we on this SID? We did have a meeting with Mr. Woopser here. It's been a couple months ago. He knew from coming out of that meeting that the Chesapeake folks were very unhappy, and they didn't know where he was coming from, despite them attempting to convince us about this SID. But he also told us he was going to keep us in the loop about this SID. Well, you guys had the first reading of the proposal, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. We never got any information that this thing was even getting close. So now here we are at the second reading, ready to approve this thing, and then we suddenly found out, oh, geez, they're voting on this thing tonight. We better get our butts down there and express our opinions. So we were not kept in the loop, and despite what Mr. Volt said wherever he went to, we all did not get the paperwork and notifications of this stuff to begin with. We also were told we could not opt out, that the Chesapeake unit could not opt out of the SID, which we couldn't understand why, because it appeared, well, we concluded that the reason for that is because nobody asked us if we could opt in, so therefore if we didn't opt in, once we're in, we couldn't opt out. So, kind of how that works. At any rate, where is this thing going from now? Are we going to get any information back on this? Are you guys going to massage this thing? You're going to change it? You're going to kill it? And if so, are the residents of the Chesapeake and the Hubbard going to be notified if you're going to resurrect this thing again, when you're going to talk about this and when you're going to meet it?
So procedurally.
That's the question.
Sir, procedurally, first of all, I'm not going to have anything to do with it, discussing it with the commissioners or the staff. Procedurally, where it stands is that we didn't have two people here who wanted to take it up for a vote tonight, and that's the only way a piece of legislation that's recommended by staff gets taken up by the commission. So I don't have an answer for you. It'll be up to the other commissioners and the staff to decide if they want to go forward with the legislation.
Okay, so we have to check the proposed docket of every city commission meeting from now until whenever to find out if it might be appearing on your docket for another second reading or possible approval.
Well, I wouldn't think it would do that. So what I would suggest is Mr. Oriole does a pretty good job of covering the issues that are contentious. And if something like this were to be placed back on the agenda, I'm pretty sure it'd be on the front page of the newspaper.
Well, depending on the register to do that, I don't think would be the proper course of action. I would think it would be the city's responsibility to keep all these folks who they said received all the petitions via email or mail. Why can't we get a notification emailed or mailed to us ahead of time if this thing is going to be brought up again? I mean, that would be the way I would do it. I'm a secretary of a couple organizations, and that's the way we operate.
Mr. Chairman.
We don't ignore the folks. We send them information ahead of time saying, a meeting's coming up, and this is what we're going to talk about.
Ms. Fine.
I agree. If there is going to be something brought back up, we need to make contact. At this point in time, I'm not really sure where I stand on it. I got a lot of feedback tonight, so I think there need to be more discussions and more inclusions from the public. And moving forward, if this is something that would show up again, we should do our due diligence and do the outreach to the public.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Again, I'd like to echo comments by the others that yes, there's been tremendous improvement in the downtown. We all appreciate that. Whether or not that continues to inflate the values of the properties in the Chesapeake, I'm not so sure about that, because a lot of the properties that have been purchased recently are being purchased by people that are going to rent them out.
And we've already had discussion tonight about what happens to some property values when they get rented out. They tend to go to hell in some cases. And we've had issues down in our building with rental people, and we fight it all summer long. So I think property values can also go down when you get a lot of rentals in there. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. My comments on the SID program as a non-downtown resident, but obviously as a Sandusky resident taxpayer that will be contributing to the $4,100 that the city pays into this program yearly. You know, I think Wes Poole brought this up when the SID aspect first came before the city commission. That would have been probably way back in April. He questioned at that time the necessity of the city of Sandusky to make up over 30% of the 60% program, and I still personally question that. When we have city staff employees from the greenhouse and volunteers in the Washington Park 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, why the Washington Park needed to be included in this program. The second area would be the Paper District Marina, which is included in this program. We have a firm that is leasing or overseeing our marina that is supposed to be taking care of it. So with those two in mind, it does kind of beg to the question whether or not this system was rigged. I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel, and there's a lot of people in the city of Sandusky that feel the same way, including these folks here. I will remind the commission too that the city's participation in this program was supposed to be a one-time $50,000 grant, and that was pretty much a promise that the city manager made. Now we've gone into a different era where now we're going to be contributing $4,100 each year over the life of this program. My second issue is, I think it was 2 meetings ago, maybe further back, I brought to the commission a picture of a issue on what's called the east wall, where the east wall and the sailing basin come together. That issue has not been fixed, and I guess my question through you to the city engineer would be, is that part of the city's 2018 sidewalk program where they're going to be fixing the Jackson Street Pier, or I'm sorry, the Meg Street Pier? Will that be included, or should I put together a group of people to try to fix that myself? And I'm being serious when I say that. We did the Washington Street Pier here a couple of years ago, and I have no problem with putting together a crew from Home Depot to try to fix that problem, especially with the 4th of July coming up. And there's a lot of people that like to use that east wall to view the fireworks at Cedar Point.
I don't know, Mr. Klein, is that something that's part of, that's on the horizon for your department?
Yeah, we have included about $40,000 in the sidewalk project to do concrete repairs on the Meigs Street Pier. We don't have the exact locations yet. We're meeting with the contractor on Thursday for our kickoff meeting. So we should have more information by the end of this week, early next week, about exactly what's included, what spalled areas are included in the project.
Okay, I guess that kind of answers it. But I think at the meeting when I showed that picture, you directed the city engineer to look into it. And again, like I said, it hasn't been taken care of. I mean, like I said, I can do it myself if I can get authority from someone in the city, send me an email saying, hey, go ahead, just let us know how much you spent to fix it.
To follow up, Mr. Swanger, after your meeting, please. And,
Okay.
Yeah, but to be clear, none of us direct any of these folks to do anything. There's only one person that does that, so.
Okay.
We can ask.
Okay, well, that's what I meant. That you asked him to look into it. And again, I'm not bashing the engineering department. I'm just following up on a question that I had prior to. My last comment is, very briefly, is you all participated, or many of you did, Saturday in the waterfront cleanup. That was an excellent program. We had like 15 people show up. That was an excellent program. The one issue that I found is that at Shoreline Park in particular, and I've emailed Mr. Klein on this, the thistles on the walkway going out parallel to the yacht club are this tall. And I know that the city's process of killing weeds is spray them, but then when they die, all you have left is brown thistles, okay? So you may want to look into your program of how you kill weeds in the city of Sandusky, maybe cut them down first while they're still green before they go to seed and then spray them. Because, and I'll give you an example, when you leave here today, drive by the city's first cemetery down by the boat ramp, and you will now see brown thistles instead of green thistles. So that system that we've been using for the last 5 or 6 years is not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwager.
Marcy Platt, 1217 Columbus Avenue. Mr. Klein answered a lot of the questions that I had about the $2 million that we're doing just for the design work and the permits and the, all the different things that we're going to do for that project. My question was, why is the city of Sandusky funding all of this? You've got partners in Cedar Point and the Erie Metro Parks. And although there's a TIF involved, and that's over the next, it's my understanding the money that's made off of those property values for that area. So if Cedar Point has restaurants and all that type of stuff, that money would go in the TIF. But we also know that's an abatement for 30 years. And so the majority of Sandusky's population does not live on that east end. The majority lives middle to west. I also saw where they did the environmental, where they're doing it. The only impact that is on the landing and on the other stuff, because nobody uses that area. Very few people use that area in that back where the airport was at. The majority of Sandusky's fishermen, the majority of the people that use it, the marinas are not over there. They really are not. That area has been filling in with sediment since the beginning of time when there were large willow trees, which I'm sure many people in this room are old enough to remember. But I don't understand why you guys voted on something for $2 million. That's a lot of money for the people of the city of Sandusky with all their other issues, when some of that burden should be handled by Cedar Point or the Erie Metro Parks. Why are we the only ones paying for that? I don't understand that concept. When the people that are going to take advantage of it is, City of Sandusky only has 25,000 people. I don't see where we've gotten any more than that. How many tourists does Cedar Point have? That landing allows their people and their hotels to walk back and forth from their activities. It more is a better advantage for Cedar Point than it is. I know it's going to go through. That's not an issue. When this administration wants something, it goes through. I know that's going to happen. I know that the people involved believe this is a huge benefit for the city of Sandusky, but I just don't see where it really helps the average person who lives in the city of Sandusky to utilize that when it's so far away from where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Platt. Anyone else present wishing to address the commission? And the chair will entertain a motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
Tired.